All right, we are on air. It is Thursday, November 12th, and we are very excited to have this meeting for some reason, none in particular, but something going on. So thank you all for coming. I want to start off with a quick set of announcements. In general, we have Dragon t-shirts and hoodies available. If you go to backdropcms.org/contribute, you can see photos of both of them. If you make a $25 donation, we'll send you a Dragon t-shirt. If you make a $50 donation, we'll send you a Dragon hoodie. If you're a Backdrop contributor already, you're actually entitled to a t-shirt. So send an email to info@backdropcms.org and we can get one in your preferred size mailed off to you. We have a Drupal camp organizer for Drupal Camp Utah had contacted us about getting Backdrop speakers at their event. That will be March 4th and 5th. Great ski time in Utah if you're interested in going there. I'm not sure what they've got on their schedule already, but last I heard they were still interested in getting Backdrop people. So if you're interested in going, that could be fun. And then we also have free PHP Storm licenses for Backdrop Contrib developers. So if you are working on a Backdrop Contrib project and have your name on the page on GitHub, we can send you a PHP Storm license. So also send an email to info@backdropcms.org and we can send those out. We have no important updates from the Project Management Committee this week, but Nate, do you want to talk a little bit about community growth?
There we go. Yes, so let's see, some things happened this week. So we talked about new projects that have been popping up, whether ported or new, into the Backdrop community. And we currently have a total of 168 total projects, including modules, themes, and layouts available for Backdrop that are available off of the GitHub Backdrop-contrib group. One new module published since last week. Thanks, Andy, for that. Great to see at least we have one module to report. We didn't an hour ago, so that's one good thing about having a meeting at the right time rather than early is in that window somebody can publish a new module. If you visit backdropcms.org, we also have a listing of all modules, themes, and layouts on the Flagship website that makes it so that you can easily download and see what projects are available there. But they're only listed there if an official stable release, I guess not necessarily stable, but if an official release needs to have been created on GitHub in order to show up on backdropcms.org. And there are a total of 102 projects that have official releases on the Flagship website. That's 10 new projects since last week, which is pretty bananas because one of our large contributors, Jerome, finally went through and tagged a bunch of releases, which is fantastic. Lots of great modules in there that now have finally popped up on the main website, including things like transliteration and views load more and pathologic, a bunch of really great projects that we're really happy to see on the main website. Let's see. I also thought it'd be interesting to start counting the number of releases that we have, which kind of reflects the amount of maintenance that happens. So new point releases that come out. There are a total of 128 releases on backdropcms.org, which right now doesn't mean a whole lot other than several projects that have had more than one release. But we'll see next week how frequently modules are coming out with new releases, basically maintaining their current code in addition to just making new modules all the time. Let's see, we have 42 total authors in the Backdrop Contrib group. If you're interested in joining the Backdrop Contrib group, we would love to have you. You can apply to the group by visiting github.com/backdrop-ops/contrib. And that's our queue where we manage the application process of just doing a basic review of any code that you've ported, and you can go through the process and get access to the Backdrop Contrib group there. Let's see. I usually go right into infrastructure, so I'll start covering that. Let's see. We still have this item in here for update status checking, which has been working for a really long time. But the one thing that hasn't been working is calculating the statistics on how many sites are out there and what modules they have installed. We've been accruing this data, but our number crunching script hasn't been working, and so we don't have these numbers on backdropcms.org yet. But once we fix the script, we will be able to tell people, how many backdrop sites are out there and what modules they're running, all of which would be a really useful set of analytics for us to start calculating. So there's an issue in project module. Project module is just like Drupal.org, the module we're using for managing what projects are out there and what releases there are. But ours has been modified substantially to work with GitHub instead of Drupal.org. But in project module, in the backdrop contrib group, there is one issue that is open, and it's issue number 9, and that is the analytics not accruing correctly. So if anybody is interested in working on that issue, you can set up a local version of project module, or if you want, you can reach out to us at info@backdropcms.org, and we will set you up with a database dump of backdropcms.org so you can work with the real data and try to get those numbers calculating. Let's see. There are some other things that are kind of peripheral. Once we get update status analytics working, we want to make it so that websites will start reporting not just what modules they have installed, but also what features or functionality they have turned on, so we can tell how many sites out there have clean URLs turned on, and things like that. And that will make it so that we will have better numbers to guide our decisions around what features are 80% features and what features are 1% features and what should be removed and what should be kept and so forth. Let's see, that is issue number 99 on backdropcms.org. And a core issue, we want to make it so that update notifications are a little less obnoxious, and instead of screaming giant red errors at the top of every administrative page, put a little notification icon in the admin bar instead. And that's issue 639. Let's see, Project Browser and Project Browser Server. We have this functionality we'd like to include in core that allows you to find and install modules from directly within your website without needing to visit GitHub or visit backdropcms.org or any other place. And that's issue 870, where that's coming along really pretty well. We have code on backdropcms.org that provides the server component, and we have a contrib project that provides the client component. But we're currently held up on a server issue that Project Browser Server, as we have it right now, has a bug in it that has an outstanding pull request that we need to get merged in and deployed to the live site to make it so that the contrib project can connect to our server. So that's been waiting on a pull request for a week or two now, and that's on me. But if anybody else is interested in reviewing that pull request, that would be super useful. The main issue for that is issue 870 in the backdrop issue queue, and that kind of links to all of the sub-issues and where we currently are held up on the Project Browser Server and so forth. Let's go on to Drush. Drush has been really pretty exciting. In the past 2 weeks, we've had some real substantial improvements there. Drush is our outstanding longest infrastructure issue. It's issue number 47 in the backdrop issue queue. Basically, it's been there since the beginning of time, since the beginning of Backdrop's existence. We've been wanting to make Backdrop work better or work at all with Drush, and in the past 2 weeks, that's kind of become a reality. We've been working closely with the Drush team. Specifically, Greg Anderson has been really accommodating to the Backdrop community. And we now have a working prototype of Drush that will do things like Drush CC all, Drush. Let's see, what are the other commands? Drush cron, Drush SQL commands, Drush update DB, so you can run update.php. We've got like a half dozen commands that are properly working now in Drush, and Drush can identify backdrop and tell what it is, and see that it can work with it, and it knows how to bootstrap, making a lot of really great progress there. I've been filing more issues with the Drush team to try to make it more flexible, because right now the approach that we're using is really kind of tedious. We basically have to rewrite all of the commands for Drush into backdrop versions, which isn't ideal. It would be great if we could use the Drupal 7 version of commands whenever those commands were totally compatible, but really, as I'm finding out, that there's really not a lot of commands that are like 100% compatible, especially if you turn off the backwards compatibility layer in backdrop. So, but we can still do better things to make it so that we have less work to do by making it so that Drush is a little bit more good at using what code it can reuse and then only swapping out the parts that are actually different. So that's been really beneficial to us as the backdrop project, but it's also been really pretty beneficial to Drush as a project for managing the differences between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. So here's hoping that we can continue working with those guys to make Drush better and make it so that we get the benefit of making it work with backdrop at the same time. If you want to follow up on that or read about it, it's issue number 47 in the main backdrop issues queue, which I think I've updated just as of this last couple of days. Okay.
Working prototype link there, does that contain instructions on how to actually put whatever files where?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so there's a working prototype. Right now it's in my personal repository, which isn't the best place and won't be where it stays ultimately. But yeah, you can visit github.com/quicksketch/backdrop-drush. And that's the preliminary version of, let's paste this in the chat, the preliminary version of Drush that works really pretty well, but you need to use like the absolute very latest version of Drush. You can't even use like the last release candidate that they made. You'll need to actually download the one out of master, which makes it a little bit inconvenient to test out, but it's there and it's working. And to be clear, Backdrop will only work with Drush 8. Once Drush 8 is released, it won't work with any previous version. It would have been nice to make it work with Drush 7, but I think that the Drush team is totally reasonable in wanting to only support the latest version of Drush. That is also the only version of Drush that will support Drupal 8. So I think that's fair enough. And with Drupal 8 coming out next week, is that right? The demand for a stable version of Drush to be out is going to follow really quickly behind that. So it's great that we're getting all of this work done, hopefully in time to beat the release of Drupal 8, so that way we can get all the changes we need into Drush 8. And then everybody will be using Drush 8 as kind of the canonical version of Drush, unless you have a Drupal 6 website. But the support for that is only going to extend until, February. So time to get off those Drupal 6 sites. And move them onto backdrop websites, of course. There's one great way of getting long-term support for your Drupal websites is moving them to backdrop. Okay, Jen, I'll let you talk about backdropcms.org.
All right, so we have a list of tasks that we want to work on for our website. The next thing on our list is to get user logins working. We feel it's nice to let people feel like they're joining something, even if there isn't necessarily anything important for them to be able to do there. Like our issue queues on GitHub, and that's the #1 thing that people tend to do on Drupal.org. But backdropcms.org should let people log in. We should collect some profile information to figure out who our people are. And we should give some other things for people to do there as well. Like we want to be able to let them post links to their websites into a showcase. We want to let people list themselves as service providers or post jobs trying to find and hire people. We want to have event calendars so event organizers can post their information there, central location for everyone to go to find out where they can hear more about Backdrop. But in order to allow any of that stuff to happen, first we have to let people log in. So what we're working on now is taking a look at Drupal.org and figuring out what kind of information really worked to collect from Drupal.org members, and see if we want to collect the same thing for people on backdropcms.org. We might also look at other example sites like what WordPress does for their developer community and see if there's information that Drupal's not collecting that we might think is available, or stuff that we maybe think that we don't need. And then we also want to build out the profile page, have it designed to make sure that it looks nice for people who get there. We want a fairly positive first impression. And then we also want to add single sign-on so that if you are already a GitHub member and you have projects that you've authored or are maintaining on GitHub for Backdrop, we would then be able to sync those two together, recognize who you are, and allow you access to edit, for example, your project pages on the Backdrop CMS website. So that's something that we're working on. I think the action item we have right here is just to create the list of profile fields and make sure those get filled out before we allow people to log in, at least as close as we can get it, because we're probably always going to be going back and changing that over time. But just so that we don't get a whole flurry of signups initially where we don't collect like people's names or locations or something, and then trying to get them to come back to update that's going to be a little more painful. So I think we'll work on that next, and I would love it if we could get that at least ready by next week. But I feel like the design part probably isn't going to be done, but fairly soon. I think we had like December 1st or something by when we wanted to have that ready. All right, so Backdrop itself. Our next bug fix release is going to be version 1.2.3, which is a cute number. We don't have anything urgently scheduled that needs to go into that release. There aren't any really critical bugs that are demanding a release. I'm not even sure how many pull requests have been merged recently, but it might be good to do that release as soon as we get all of the patches that went into the latest version of Drupal, which was 7.4.0. As soon as we get those merged in, that might be a good time to cut a new release for Backdrop, even though it's not particularly urgent. The next minor release, 1.3.0, currently scheduled for January 15th, is going to be usability-focused release. And so we have a pretty large set of issues if you check the issue queue under the milestone 1.3.0. It's a pretty big set of issues we want to get done by then. Of course, most of them don't need to wait until 1.3 to be merged in. We can merge them in whenever, so as soon as they're ready, we can merge them and include them in whatever release. But I would love to see as many as possible of those get done for 1.3.0. There are some really big doozies in that list, like the idea of redesigning the field UI. We know it's bad. It's been bad since Drupal 6. Trying to solve that problem is going to be really hard, and it's probably going to require rewriting maybe the entire field UI module. And so that's something that might not go until 1.3. But anything little, like changing terminology from edit to configure or restructuring the menu UI, all of that stuff can go in at any point. But I think it will be good to have, this bullet list of fairly minor but important issues, and give us a chance to just go back and say, like, we put in layouts module, we know it's not done yet, let's put some polish on what we have there and make it more complete as a tool. We know, I actually spent some time looking for earlier this week, there's a follow-up issue for views to make the UI responsive. I couldn't find it. I don't know if that already went in, Nate, if you know about that, but I couldn't find an issue.
That's the one that I created. There is an issue there for it.
That's the redesign the ViewsUI issue.
Oh.
There was one that Wes was working on that was just to take the ViewsUI from Drupal 7 and make it responsive, because it wasn't.
Oh, right, okay.
I don't know if that one got done already, and I was just looking in open issues or something, but I couldn't find the issue. And that was something that we had originally scheduled for 1.3, but I think an entire redesign of the ViewsUI might not be a good candidate for 1.3. Number one is really hard.
Yeah, well, probably not for this one, no.
Our target audience right now are people who are coming from Drupal 7, and even though the ViewsUI is not good, people know their way around it, and I feel like breaking that piece of understanding might not be worthwhile, but I think that it's something that we could develop and contrib, because just like FieldUI, like ViewsUI is a separate tool. We could test it out, and we could then, depending on how well that works and how soon we need to get it in, it could be scheduled for like include this in 2.x or before that if it becomes necessary, like becomes obvious. If it's obviously better, we'll put it in.
Okay.
But I would love to focus on FieldUI first, just because it's been broken longer. But we can see how that goes. Let's see. So yeah, long list at 1.3. Also, if you're just interested in usability fixes in general, search the issue queue for square brackets with UX between them, and you'll get a much longer list of issues, not all of which are scheduled for 1.3, that would be worth focusing on. So there's a ton of usability issues in Backdrop. There were a ton in Drupal. We're obviously starting from a place where we know there's room for improvement. And any of those can go in at any time, too. Those don't need to be scheduled for a specific release. If we get a good pull request, we can just merge it for most of them. So since 1.3 is not an issue that will include any major new features, we're also starting to think about what we should put into 1.4. And so far, the two candidates we have for that are some kind of references module. We really like the code that's in references module, but we like the feature that the entity reference module provides. So it would be good to see if we can kind of create a hybrid of the two of those, so that there's a single field that lets you choose which type of thing you're referencing, rather than having a different field type for nodes versus user versus terms.
I dug into that a little bit, and it definitely seems possible. I just need to post what I've learned so far and try to come up with a plan for finishing it.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, and I think that is the kind of thing that we could put into 1.4. We would just need to see if there's a way that we can get the taxonomy term reference module that's already in core also into that, which might make things a little bit more complicated, because it may not be written the way references is written.
Well, basically, basically it should seem the reference field should be able to reference anything automatically, and but it could use the sorry, there's a street sweeper going by, so I'm going to mute. We can return.
So I think what Mike's trying to say is that it shouldn't be hard to make the code work the way we want. We'll just need to. My point, I think, was we just need to write an update hook for anyone who's done a term reference the old way, if it's necessary to change the data model to match references in the future. And maybe we can just remove all of the code that's in core now as soon as we put in references, if we've got that problem solved another way. I like removing code. All right. So if you're interested in future plans for Backdrop, we do have most of this posted on our website, backdropcms.org/roadmap. I'm not sure we have the 1.4 items on there just because it's so far in the future. We're still kind of abstractly thinking about what that should be. But in general, that's where we like to post what we're going to be working. In addition to user experience issues, which I mentioned already, we've also always got our ears open for developer experience issues. And this is something that, right now our primary target audience are people coming from Drupal 7. But as more and more people move on to Drupal 8, and off of Drupal 7, that target audience is going to disappear, and we're going to need to make sure that Backdrop is a good candidate for people coming from other audiences. So general PHP developers, people who have experience with WordPress, all of these people are going to need to be able to develop for Backdrop more easily than people are currently trying to develop for Drupal 7. And so as you guys are working on websites, themes, layouts, whatever it is with Backdrop, if you find something that's really weird, that just, how you would intuitively solve the problem is not how the problem is actually solved, let's make a note of that, because those are the same places that people who are new to the project in the future are going to find pain. And it would be really nice if we could solve those issues by either making it easier, adding helper functions, better documentation, just to try and help people get over the learning curve. We already know Drupal 7 is a huge one. We want to decrease ours, and so that means we have to keep our eyes open for places where we can actually do that. I feel like the theme layer is also super important because most web developers start with HTML and CSS. They don't start being a MySQL query expert. And so I feel like that on-ramp there, like getting the theme layer more friendly for people, is going to be really important. And then deep digging in, like, okay, now I've written themes, I'm going to write a module. What is my first experience writing a module like? Does it, you know, is there anything really weird in that process? And making sure that we can kind of sort that out and make it a more approachable system to anyone, regardless of their former experience. So keep your eyes out for that. Create issues on GitHub, tag them with DX, and we'll try and solve those problems, mostly probably for Backdrop 2, but if there is anything we can do in Backdrop 1, we can look at that as well. All right, so every Thursday we have this weekly meeting, and usually afterwards we have a little sprint in on Backdrop, usually in the GitHub issue queue. There's a whole bunch of people collaborating and working together on stuff. We hang out on IRC. We've also started a new Gitter chat account for Backdrop, which is which is pretty exciting. I actually really like it because anyone who's participated in the Backdrop issue queue automatically has access to hang out and chat with us there, which is pretty nice. But I'm curious to see how the old school Drupal people who are used to IRC are going to take to it, if anyone's going to be as eager to hop over from one to the other. But we'll see. For me, Gitter feels a lot like Slack, which I also really like, in that it'll like email you if you miss something. It's not very prompt about it. I sometimes find out 2 hours later that someone was trying to get my attention. But it is better than nothing. Like in IRC, if you miss someone trying to get your attention, it's gone forever unless you have logging and actively check it. So I think Gitter's a pretty good alternative, and I'm happy to keep trying that for a while and see how everyone feels about it. So our little sprints, people have asked, like, is that only on Thursday? The honest answer is no. Like, it kind of happens all the time. Whenever I'm working on Backdrop projects, I'm hanging out in there. Whenever I'm getting really grumpy about something in the Backdrop UI and want to fix issues, I'll go in there and complain about it. We work on Backdrop all the time, so if there's a good time for you to work on Backdrop and it's not a Thursday afternoon and you want to do some sprinting, there's friends in there. You can chat with whoever and get help on things if you need it or share ideas. So anytime you have to give, we appreciate. Let's see. So we also have a list of upcoming events we usually talk about, but now that it is the end of the year and approaching holiday season, our next Backdrop events aren't scheduled until February. There's a couple of upcoming things here in the San Francisco Bay Area. If anyone is interested, there is a Oakland 2.0 group, which I think we'll probably go to, which is just kind of a place for people who have tech ideas to talk about stuff and meet and greet with other people who have good ideas, which is a fairly casual, like, 3-hour event one evening, which I think Nate and I will probably be going to. And then there is, Mike, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but there's like a nonprofit specific developer experience sharing event, which is 3 days long, I think, and it's very casual, kind of everybody gets together or breaks out into groups and talks about solutions that have worked for them, which I think I'm planning on going to. I'm not sure Nate and I are both going to go to it because it has kind of a hefty ticket price. It does include food, so there's that too. But I think that would be good. I'm not sure I have a lot of experience in the nonprofit space. I have a little. But it would be good to hear about the kinds of problems they're facing and see if Backdrop might be a solution, even though I might not. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think it'll be a fun event.
It's a fun event, and it's a good group of people, so it's next week, and it's in Oakland at Preservation Park, which is just like a couple blocks north of the 19th Street BART station, so it's really convenient. And yeah, it's $150 to register unless you're a giant company, and that covers 3 days of unconferencing, breakfast and lunch, and then also usually there's a party, which they provide a couple of free drinks for people and stuff. And then there's also other sort of hangouts afterwards for socializing. So no, it's really good. It's an unconference. People propose sessions and then go to sessions, and it's really good. And it's if you search for Nonprofit Development Summit, you'll get to it. It's hosted by Aspiration Tech.
Okay. I'll put it on the calendar too, so if anyone here is interested, they'll know about it. Okay, thanks, Mike. Let's see, how are we doing on our agenda? I think that's everything that we had actively scheduled to talk about, but does anyone have any questions or comments or anything while we're all here? All right, here's a far out question. So yeah, this is kind of an interesting situation that we're in right now where Backdrop is kind of by developers for developers. But if our target audience is aiming at non-coders, maybe we should have marketing people involved or target marketing people in some way that's a little bit better than what we're doing now. Yeah, I would love to get a non-coder marketing type person involved. I don't know how to do that. First of all, we need to find one, and I think we've got a bunch of people in the Backdrop community who are like, I can't code, how can I help? Which would be great, but I don't know how to make like actionable tasks for them to do, where it's just like tell all your friends, but that's kind of like then what? I would love it if we had someone who knew something about marketing who could help tell us what to do or tell other people in our community how to help. But I definitely hear that like we do need to figure out how to get good marketing in. So if anyone knows any of that, if anyone watching this now or later knows anything about marketing and can help us with that side of things, knows how to take a system and make it appealing to other marketing people, that's definitely something I think we could work on. Anything else? Questions, comments? No? Yeah. Okay. Well, then I think we should maybe wrap this meeting and go back to working on / playing with / dreaming about doing things with Backdrop. But thanks all for coming for this meeting today.
Jen, why don't you give a shout out to your new Backdrop website that launched yesterday?
It's a soft launch. And there's some follow-up on it. Okay, so just very exciting. I did launch my first Backdrop client website yesterday, but it's like there's a couple of things that we need to fix before I can like make a lot of noise about it. So I'm very excited that like something's done, but it's not done. It's just like soft launch done. So once I go through some of the follow-up stuff, then I can definitely make a bunch of noise about the actual website because it's going to be really pretty. I want you guys to see it, but it's not like approved by the designer yet. So if a bunch of people start seeing it and complaining about things, he's going to be grumpy. We'll get those changes done. But yeah, and yeah, well, okay, fine. Post it here. It's in the Google Hangout chat.
If you join the Hangout, then you get to see the website. That's and talk about it next week, maybe.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week once I get all these follow-up issues done. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And, yeah, more of the same. Have a good week.
All right. Happy week, guys. Thanks all for joining in. We'll talk to you guys next week.